At 103 years old, Kirk Douglas told everyone who he thought were the 7 meanest actors in Hollywood. Kirk Douglas was born with the name Isher Danielovich on December 9, 1916, in a small town called Amsterdam, New York. He started out super poor and became one of the biggest, most famous stars ever in movies. His parents were poor Jewish people who moved from Belarus, so Kirk grew up in a regular working family where money was tight and life was tough a lot of the time. Even though they were poor, his family taught him to never give up and to always work hard and dream big. Those things shaped his whole life and his acting. When he was little, Kirk already worked really hard. He did great in school and also took any little job he could find to help his family pay bills. That tough attitude later showed up in all the strong characters he played in movies. Kirk's road to becoming a star wasn't easy or promised. He went to St. Lawrence University where he studied acting and got better at it. Then he joined the U.S. Navy and fought in World War II. Serving in the war showed how brave he was, and it also made his acting deeper and more real when he came back. After the war, he acted on stage a lot in plays, which helped him understand feelings and how to build characters. All that hard stage work set him up for a movie career that lasted over 60 years. Everyone loved how strong, exciting, and good at all kinds of roles he was. Kirk got really famous in the late 1940s and 1950s and became the perfect leading man. His big break came in the 1949 movie Champion, where he was so good he got nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor. It showed how intense, charming, and ready-to-play complicated guys he was. Over the years, he gave amazing performances in classic movies like Ace in the Hole in 1951, The Bad and the Beautiful in 1952, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in 1954, and the huge movie Spartacus in 1960, directed by Stanley Kubrick. In Spartacus, he played the brave gladiator who started a slave rebellion, and he also did something super important. He fought the Hollywood blacklist by giving credit to a writer named Dalton Trumbo, who wasn't allowed to work. That showed Kirk really cared about what was fair. Kirk could play super tough guys, and also guys who were soft and hurt inside, so people of all ages loved him. Besides acting, he was a successful producer, director, and writer too. He had tons of talent and big dreams. He started his own company called Bryna Productions, so he could be the boss of his movies and showed he was just as smart at the business part as he was at acting. He wrote books too, like his memoir The Ragman's Son in 1988, and another one with his wife Anne called Kirk and Anne, Letters of Love, Laughter, and A Lifetime in Hollywood in 2017. Those books let fans see the real him, his thoughts, and how he got through good times and bad times. Even when he got really old, Kirk kept writing, talking, and staying in touch with fans all over the world. His legacy is way bigger than just movies. In his personal life, especially his marriages, you can see how complicated love can be and how he changed over the years. His first wife was Diana Dill, a beautiful actress and model from Bermuda. They met in the early 1940s when Kirk was still trying to make it as an actor in tough Hollywood. They got married in 1943, right when the world was crazy because of World War II. And like many young couples, they just wanted love and a normal life. Diana came from a fancy family and brought class and calm to balance Kirk's wild energy and big dreams. They went through the happy and hard parts of early marriage while Kirk's career started taking off, which meant long days, lots of traveling, and everyone watching them. They had 2 sons, Michael and Joel, who both ended up working in movies and entertainment too. Even though they loved each other and had a family, the marriage broke because being a big star put too much pressure on Evie. After 8 years, they got divorced in 1951. It hurt, but it let both of them grow on their own. A few years later, Kirk fell in love again with Ann Bidens, a woman born in Europe who did charity work and produced movies. She became the love of his life. They got married in 1954 and had one of the longest, happiest marriages in Hollywood. Ann was born in Germany and was smart, classy, and understood the world in a way that fit perfectly with Kirk's big personality. They built a relationship full of respect, the same values, and caring about family and helping people. Their marriage lasted over 60 years, which is super rare in Hollywood, where relationships usually don't last. Ann wasn't just his wife. She was his best friend and partner who helped him through everything in his career and also did her own amazing charity work. People knew them for being really generous. They threw big parties for charity and helped kids' health and people all over the world. Their love was deep, loyal, and showed that even with fame and money, real connection matters most. When he was an incredible 103 years old, the movie legend Kirk Douglas, who had one of the longest, most successful careers ever, openly shared his own list of the 7 actors he thought were the meanest people he ever met in Hollywood. Everyone knew Kirk was funny, huge personality, and super honest, so he didn't hold back when he talked about the bad side of show business. He laughed and said Hollywood always has good people and bad people, but these 7 were on another level. Every name he gave came with a story from his own life and showed what really went on behind all the fancy Hollywood stuff. First, he named Marlon Brando, the super talented method actor who could be crazy and messy on set. Kirk said Marlon was so brilliant he could light up any room, but he was also selfish and left a mess everywhere they went. He acted like the whole world had to revolve around him and would mess things up for anyone in his way. Kirk remembered times on set when Brando got mad and made everything slow and stressful for everyone. Next was Errol Flynn, the adventure movie star whose real life was even wilder than his movies. Kirk said Errol was charming and fearless, but a total pain if you didn't do exactly what he wanted. His crazy life and love for trouble made working with him hard and got movies in the news for bad reasons. Still, Kirk said you couldn't help liking him because he had that magic charm. He was bad, but impossible to hate. Then Kirk talked about Elizabeth Taylor, whose beauty and talent were huge, but her personal life was wild. He said Elizabeth could be mean in a really sharp way, like a knife. She used her fame to control people and get whatever she wanted. Sets with her were full of fights and drama, and sometimes she was just plain cruel. About John Wayne, Kirk sounded a little surprised himself. Everyone thought the Duke was the perfect, tough, good guy with strong beliefs, but Kirk said he could be really stubborn and cold to people, especially younger actors trying to make it. Next was Richard Burton, who was an acting genius but had a crazy temper. Kirk said Richard's moods exploded like a volcano and he would yell at anyone nearby for no reason. His heavy drinking and big fights made every set stressful and cost everyone a lot. He didn't leave out Vivien Leigh. Kirk said softly that Vivien fought personal demons. She was unbelievably talented, but when she felt insecure, she could be sneaky and hurtful to the people who loved her most. He felt sad for her because she was such a tragic person. Last was Bette Davis, the powerhouse actress who never accepted anything less than perfect. Kirk said Bette was tough and didn't put up with anyone silly. Her huge drive, so me times turned mean. She could scare people, cut them down with words, and act ruthless if she thought it protected her career. Kirk remembered her famous fights and how hard she was on everyone, showing that her love for great work sometimes made her treat people badly. On January 28, 1996, when he was 79, Kirk Douglas had a really bad stroke that changed his whole life. The stroke made it super hard for him to talk. It was frustrating and scary for a man whose whole career was his strong voice and the way he commanded a room. Doctors told his wife Anne that if he didn't get a lot better fast, he might never speak normally again. Strokes at that age usually leave permanent damage, so things looked bad. But Kirk showed the same never-give-up spirit he always had. He worked every day with speech therapists, doing hard exercises over and over to wake up his brain and muscles. It took months of tough work, but little by little he got his voice back. It wasn't exactly the same. It was slower and harder for him, but he could talk, make sentences, and share his thoughts with family, doctors, and fans again. His comeback was proof anyone can fight through something huge if they keep trying. Just 2 months after the stroke, in March 1996, Kirk went to the Oscars and accepted a special Lifetime award. Even though he had just been through something awful, he got on stage, thanked everyone, and spoke with so much heart that the whole room was moved. People called it one of the bravest, most inspiring moments ever. It showed he still wanted to connect with the world and share his warmth. Later, he wrote a whole book about it in 2002 called My Stroke of Luck. The book told his story and also gave real tips for other people and families going through the same thing. He wanted to help them feel hope, stay strong, and lean on the people who love them. Kirk Douglas lived a super long, full life and passed away peacefully at his home in Beverly Hills on February 5, 2020. He was surrounded by his family and died at the amazing age of 103 after more than 80 years as a star and way more. His funeral was 2 days later on February 7th at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery. It showed how much people loved him and how important family was to him. He was buried right next to his son Eric, which was a beautiful, sad reminder that family always came first for him.
The rock and roll legend Jimmy Page is pretty much a god when it comes to playing guitar. The famous member of Led Zeppelin, one of the biggest bands ever, has won the hearts of fans all over the world. People show him huge respect, both fans and other musicians. However, behind all his amazing power over rock music, there were always rumors going around about the life of this super influential guitarist. Watch the video as we check out what Jimmy Page has just revealed and see how it proved some of what fans already kind of believed. Jimmy has probably been on the cover of every guitar magazine in the world. He got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. In places like the UK, he was the guitarist everyone wanted for years. Even with all this success, Jimmy kept his private life secret, which made him seem even more mysterious. Like everyone, Jimmy started from somewhere. Jimmy was born James Patrick Page on January 9, 1944, in Hounslow, Middlesex, London. His parents are James Patrick Page and Patricia Elizabeth Gaffin. In 1952, Jimmy's family moved to Feltham and later to Miles Road, Epsom in Surrey. There he went to Epsom County Pound Lane Primary School as an 8-year-old boy, and at 11 he started at Ewell County Secondary School in West Ewell. His dad worked in a company while his mom was employed as a doctor's secretary. When Jimmy was 12, he started playing guitar. He had found a guitar in the house they moved into at the time, and since no one came back to claim the guitar, it was there for Jimmy to play with. He said himself, "I'm not sure if the guitar belonged to the previous residents of the house or if it was left by a family friend." No one could explain why it was there. Jimmy later got some lessons in Kingston, but mostly learned on his own, saying, "I didn't have many guitarists around when I was growing up. There was just one guitarist at my school who taught me my first chords, and I continued learning on my own. I got bored, so I learned by listening to records. It became a very personal journey for me." That other guitarist was a guy named Rod Wyatt, who was a bit older than him. They, along with another guy, Pete Calvert, would practice at Jimmy's house. Jimmy especially spent many hours practicing and couldn't be away from his beloved guitar for 1 second, to the point of even taking it to school. There he was allowed to bring it into the school, but not into the class. So it was often taken away while Jimmy was in class, but it was returned to him after class. Thanks to the influences of Bert Jansch, John Renbourn, Elmore James, and B.B. King, Jimmy got interested in folk music and the blues. In 1957, the teenage Jimmy joined a skiffle group, appearing on Hugh Weldon's All Your Own Talent show. They performed on BBC One, playing songs like Mama Don't Want a Skiffle Anymore and In Them Old Cotton Fields Back Home. Jimmy had saved up from doing odd summer jobs and bought himself a Hofner President acoustic guitar, which he played on the show. When asked about his future plans, Jimmy said he wanted to do biological research to find a cure for cancer if it hadn't been discovered by then. Clearly, the young boy had a good heart. He soon decided to leave school at 14 to focus on music. He then joined a band called the Crusaders. He toured with them for nearly 2 years and played on some of Neil Christian's records, like the single The Road to Love from November 1962. After getting sick with glandular fever while playing with Neil Christian, Jimmy had to stop touring. While he was getting better, he decided to take a break from music and focus on painting. He went to Sutton Art College in Surrey, and he said, "I was traveling around all the time on a bus. I did that for 2 years after I left school, to the point where I was starting to get to really good money, but I was getting ill. So I went back to art college, and that was a total change in direction. That's why I say it's possible to be as dedicated as I was to playing the guitar. I knew doing it that way was wearing me out forever. Every 2 months, I had glandular fever, so for the next 18 months I was living on $10 a week and getting my strength up, but I was still playing at college. He sometimes performed at the Marquee with bands like Alexis Corner, Blues Incorporated, Eric Clapton, and Jeff Beck. One night, John Gibb from the Silhouettes noticed him and asked him to help record some singles for EME, including The Worrying Kind. After trying out different groups like Carter Lewis and the Southerners, Mike Hurst and The Method, and Mickey Finn and the Blumen, Jimmy decided to focus on full-time session work. Thankfully, Mike Leander from Decca Records offered him regular studio work. His first session for the label was recording Diamonds by Jet Harris and Tony Meehan, which hit #1 on the singles chart in early 1963. As a session guitarist, Jimmy was known as Lil Jim P, to avoid confusion with another famous English session guitarist, Big Jim Sullivan. Jimmy was often called in as insurance when the recording artist needed a replacement or second guitarist. Jimmy mentioned that in the beginning they let him play what he wanted, since he couldn't read music at that time. Soon enough, Jimmy became the favorite session guitarist of record producer Shel Talmy. Because of this, he got to play guitar on songs for famous bands like The Who and The Kinks. For the Kinks' first album, he played acoustic 12-string guitar on 2 tracks. He also played rhythm guitar on The Who's first single, I Can't Explain, and lead guitar on another track. In 1965, Jimmy got a job from Stone's manager Andrew Loog Oldham to be the main producer and AR person for the new Immediate Records label. This allowed him to play on or produce songs by artists like John Mayall, Nico, Chris Farlow, Twy, See As Much, and Clapton. He also produced Dana Gillespie's single Thank You Boy that year. Around this time, Jimmy was linked with American singer Jackie DeShannon. The two teamed up briefly to write songs. Jimmy teamed up with Big Jim Sullivan to work on various albums like John McLaughlin's The Marquee Wishbone album, Donovan's Sunshine Superman, and Engelbert Humperdinck's Release Me. Additionally, Jimmy played guitar on tracks for artists like Johnny Halliday, Al Stewart, and Joe Cocker. From 1970 onwards, Jimmy played lead guitar on 10 Roy Harper tracks, totaling 81 minutes of music. He also recorded with Keith Richards on guitar and vocals. In 1974, they worked on a track called Scarlet with Rick Gretsch on bass and Bruce Rowland on drums. When asked about the songs he played on, especially those where his role is debated, Jimmy often says it's tough to remember exactly what he did because he was involved in so many sessions at that time. In a radio interview, he mentioned that he was really busy doing 3 sessions a day, 15 sessions a week. He could be playing with a band, working on film music, or participating in a folk session. He had to juggle all these different roles. Jimmy finally stopped doing studio work when Stax Records' influence led to more brass and orchestral arrangements in music, reducing the focus on guitars. He mentioned that his time as a session player was like going to a really good school. He played in numerous sessions daily without knowing beforehand what he would play. Despite some bad sessions, he learned valuable lessons. He decided to quit when he started getting requests for Muzak, finding it too ridiculous. Interestingly, a week after quitting, he joined the Yardbirds. Initially, being a session musician was enjoyable due to the strict studio rules. You had to play perfectly once the song started. Jimmy was asked to join the Yardbirds in 1964 after Eric Clapton left, but he turned it down to stay loyal to his friend. When Clapton officially left in 1965, Jimmy was offered the spot, but recommended Jeff Beck instead. In 1966, Jimmy, Beck, and others recorded Beck's Bolero, sparking the idea of a supergroup. They planned to include John Entwistle and Keith Moon, but faced challenges in finding a vocalist and dealing with contracts. It was during this time that Moon first suggested the name Led Zeppelin, inspired by a comment from Entwistle about the project's potential success. Jimmy went to a Yardbirds concert at Oxford shortly before joining the band. He offered to replace Paul Samwell Smith, who was leaving, and the group accepted. Initially, Jimmy played bass, but later switched to twin lead guitar with Beck. Despite their musical potential, conflicts arose due to constant touring and limited success. They released a single together, but faced challenges. While Jimmy, Beck, and Clapton were in the Yardbirds, they never played together at the same time. After Beck left, the Yardbirds continued as a quartet with Jimmy on lead guitar. They released an album called Little Games, which didn't do well in stores, but their live shows became more intense and experimental. These performances laid the groundwork for Led Zeppelin style. When Ralph and McCarty left in 1968, Jimmy had to find replacements because the group had not finished their Scandinavian tour, so he brought in vocalist Robert Plant, drummer John Bonham, and John Paul Jones to form the new Yardbirds, a name inspired by an old joke. Eventually, they became Led Zeppelin thanks to manager Peter Grant's change to avoid mispronunciation. Jimmy had a clear vision for Led Zeppelin right from the start. He gathered ideas from his time with the Yardbirds, where he could improvise a lot during live shows. These experiences helped him create a unique mix of blues, hard rock, and acoustic music with heavy riffs, something never seen before. Led Zeppelin soon became one of the top-selling music groups ever. They sold over 200 to 300 million albums, worldwide, with 111.5 million certified units in the U.S. Their 9 studio albums all hit the top 10 on the Billboard chart, and 6 made it to number 1. The band was known for shaping heavy metal and hard rock, with Jimmy's influence as a producer and musician. Their unique style came from many different influences. Led Zeppelin set records on concert tours, but also got a reputation for wild parties. Despite personal struggles in the late 1970s, they stayed successful, both commercially and with critics. During the 1970s to early 1980s, Jimmy was in a relationship with French model Charlotte Martin. They had a daughter named Scarlett Page in 1971, who is now a photographer. Jimmy sweetly called Charlotte "my lady" during their time together. Around that same time, Jimmy was in a well-known one-year relationship with a young fan named Laurie Maddox, who was also known as Laurie Maddox. This started when she was 14 or 15, and Jimmy was 28. Maddox remembers their first meeting as feeling like she was being taken against her will to a room with Jimmy. On the career side, Led Zeppelin held together, but in 1980, Bonham's death at Jimmy's house was the final blow. Bonham passed away on September 25, 1980, at Jimmy's home in Windsor, Berkshire, after a day of drinking and practicing. As per the coroner's findings, Bonham had drunk a huge amount of alcohol, the same as 40 shots of vodka that day. Bonham was so drunk that he couldn't wake up when his body started throwing up the alcohol. Jimmy was so sad about his friend's death that he couldn't even pick up the guitar at first. However, he finally came back to music, but worked on different short projects, as well as solo stuff and movie soundtracks. He also got into charity work. He celebrated his 40th birthday in January 1984, an age he once thought he might not reach. People close to Jimmy at the time said there might be a new band and tour, so Jimmy himself talked about the influence of blues and early rock musicians on his music, and saw the chance for new exciting music to come. He then worked with Roy Harper for the 1984 album Whatever Happened to Jugula, and played at folk festivals with funny names like the McGregors and Themselves. In the same year, he worked with Plant in the Honey Drippers for their album The Honey Drippers Volume 1, and worked with John Paul Jones on the movie soundtrack Scream for Help. After that, Jimmy joined with Paul Rodgers for 2 albums as The Firm. Their first self-titled album in 1985 had hits like Radioactive and Satisfaction Guaranteed, reaching number 17 on the Billboard Pop Albums chart and going gold in the U.S. They released Mean Business in 1986 before breaking up after touring. It was while touring with The Firm that Jimmy fell in love again. He met Patricia Ecker, who was a model at the time while she was working as a waitress in a restaurant in New Orleans. At the end of The Firm's 1986 U.S. tour, Patricia went to London with Jimmy. A couple of months later, in December 1986, they got married. They have a son, James Patrick Page, born in April 1988. The couple later split in 1995 without saying why. Later on, Jimmy married Jimena Gomez Paracha, whom he met in Brazil during the No Quarter tour. Jimena was 23 years old at the time she met Jimmy, and Jimmy was 51 years old. The big age difference between them caused a lot of gossip. Even with that, they stayed together for a long time before they also split after 13 years of marriage. Their marriage produced Zofia Jade and Ashen Josan. Clearly, Jimmy wasn't great at keeping relationships long-term at the time. Despite this, Jimmy always stayed positive and kept doing well in his career. Jimmy did other things like session work for Graham Nash, Stephen Stills, and the Rolling Stones. He briefly got back with his old Yardbirds friends for the Box of Frogs album Strangeland in 1986. Jimmy also put out a solo album called Outrider in 1988, with help from Plant and John Miles. On the opening song, Wasting My Time. During those years, Jimmy also got back with his old Led Zeppelin friends for a few live shows, especially in 1985 at the Live Aid concert with Phil Collins and Tony Thompson on drums. Jimmy, Plant, Jones, and Jason Bonham, John Bonham's son, played at the Atlantic Records' 40th anniversary show in 1988, closing the 12-hour event. In 1990, there was a concert at Nebworth, and Plant was surprised when Jimmy joined him on stage. That same year, Jimmy played with Aerosmith at the Monsters of Rock Festival. He also jammed with the band's old members at Jason Bonham's wedding. Then in 1993, Jimmy worked with David Coverdale from Whitesnake for the Coverdale Page album and a short tour in Japan. By 1994, Jimmy and Plant got back together for a show on MTV's Unplugged series. Their special called Unleaded was a huge hit, getting MTV's highest ratings ever. After a successful tour in the mid-1990s for No Quarter, Jimmy and Plant put out the album Walking into Clarksdale in 1998. It had Grammy-winning songs like Most High and Please Read the Letter. Jimmy worked on making the Led Zeppelin music collection better. He took part in charity events like the one for the Action for Brazil's Children Trust, started by his wife in 1998. That same year, Jimmy played guitar for Puff Daddy's song Come With Me, which used Led Zeppelin's Kashmir and was in the Godzilla movie soundtrack. They even played the song on Saturday Night Live. After a charity show in the summer where the Black Crowes joined him, Jimmy worked with the band for 6 shows in October 1999. They played songs from Led Zeppelin and some old blues and rock songs. The last 2 shows in Los Angeles were recorded and released as a live album called Live at the Greek in 2000. After the live album came out, Jimmy and the Black Crowes kept working together and toured with The Who in 2000, but Jimmy left early. In 2001, Jimmy played with Fred Durst and Wes Scantlin on Thank You at the MTV Europe Video Music Awards. He then got back with Plant, recording a song for a tribute album and playing at the Montreux Jazz Festival. 4 years later, Jimmy was honored with the Officer of the Order of the British Empire, OB, for his charity work in Brazil. He became an honorary citizen of Rio de Janeiro and received a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award with Led Zeppelin. In November 2006, Led Zeppelin got into the UK Music Hall of Fame. The event was on TV with famous fans like Roger Taylor, Slash, and many others. In an interview with the BBC about the induction, Jimmy talked about making new music in 2007, saying he had an album idea he wanted to work on. He also hinted at some Zeppelin stuff coming up. In December 2007, the remaining members of Led Zeppelin, together with Jason Bonham, played a charity concert at the O2 Arena in London. Led Zeppelin set a world record for the most ticket requests for one show, with a crazy 20 million people trying to get in. On June 7, 2008, Jimmy and John Paul Jones joined Foo Fighters at Wembley Stadium, closing the show with Rock and Roll and Ramble On. 2 weeks later, Jimmy got an honorary doctorate from the University of Surrey at Guildford Cathedral. During the 2008 Summer Olympics, Jimmy performed with Leona Lewis at the closing ceremony. The United Nations gave Jimmy a special award for peace in 2010. On June 3, 2011, Jimmy played with Donovan at the Royal Albert Hall in London. Then, 10 days later, he surprised everyone by playing with the Black Crowes at Shepherd's Bush Empire. That same year, Jimmy also joined Roy Harper for his 70th birthday concert at London's Royal Festival Hall. In November, British politician Lise Doucet started a campaign to make Jimmy a knight because of his music work. Then, in December 2012, President Obama honored Jimmy, Plant A, and Jones at the Kennedy Center. This award was a big deal in the U.S. because it was for people who changed American culture through the arts. In 2013, Jimmy and Led Zeppelin won a Grammy for Best Rock Album for Celebration Day. The next year, he got an honorary doctorate from Berklee College of Music in Boston. However, that year an NME article said that Plant was a bit upset and confused by Jimmy in an ongoing Led Zeppelin disagreement. Jimmy had been frustrated with Plant for holding up reunion plans. Instead, Plant suggested they work together just on acoustic stuff. Then, in September of 2014, Jimmy, who hadn't toured solo since 1988, announced plans to start a new band and play songs from his whole career. He talked about maybe hitting the road, saying he hadn't picked the band yet, but planned to soon. Just when people thought Jimmy would never find love again, he met Scarlett Sabet. They started dating in 2014 after he waited a while to hear Scarlett's poetry reading at a London bookshop. The couple has been together ever since. Scarlett is much younger than Jimmy, only 34 years old, and he's 80 now. They've been together since she was 25 and have worked together at Jimmy's London home tower house for almost 9 years. She says he's a funny family man, very different from what the media shows. In an interview, Scarlett talked about their quiet life together. Jimmy has this bad boy reputation, and people always talk about his Casanova image. He's not just my partner, he's my best friend, who makes me laugh the most. Despite our age gap, it doesn't bother us when we're together. She added, "We don't have big parties at home. Jimmy's kids and my brothers and sisters visit us. We enjoy our time together. I feel safe and inspired in this house." Looks like Jimmy finally made a relationship last after all. Even with Jimmy's amazing music career and the huge legacy he built, he has had some controversies over the years. The Me Too movement brought up his questionable relationship with Laurie Maddox. You see, she said Jimmy was really into her and had someone bring her to his suite at the LA Hyatt House. She described him as looking like a gangster with a hat over his eyes and a cane, which she thought was cool. They then had a passionate relationship for a few years. However, at the time, Maddox was only 14 when she met him, and Jimmy was 28. He tried to keep their relationship secret, even though this kind of thing could get you in big trouble back then. Jimmy managed to stay out of legal trouble. He finally ended things with Maddox and started dating Bebe Buell, who was legal age. But that wasn't the only controversy. Jimmy really liked Aleister Crowley, which made people say he was into devil worship. He even had Crowley's saying, "Do what thou wilt," on Led Zeppelin 3 vinyl. Although there was no real proof that Jimmy was a Satanist, he just liked Crowley's idea of personal freedom. Jimmy actually bought Crowley's old house by Loch Ness in Scotland in 1971. He later said it felt haunted, but not necessarily because of Crowley. There was also a rumor that Led Zeppelin made a deal with the devil to get famous. In fact, someone said that playing Led Zeppelin's famous song "Stairway to Heaven" backwards sounded like a scary message about Satan. Jimmy didn't deny the rumors, but he said, "I don't want to talk about my beliefs or magic. I'm not here to push what I believe on others." Plant was shocked by the whole backward Satan thing and said, "Who on earth would think of doing that? You really need too much time on your hands to think people would go that far." It can be said without any doubt that Jimmy has gone farther than most when it comes to worldwide success. However, it doesn't seem to stop him from wanting more. Jimmy has talked about maybe putting out more songs from his album with David Coverdale, Coverdale Page. On April 18, 2024, a post on Jimmy's Facebook and Instagram pages talked about the project and hinted at maybe putting out extra tracks like Saccharin in an expanded version someday. It's not clear why he decided to talk about making the Coverdale Page album bigger now, a year after it turned 30. Coverdale kept saying he wanted a box set of the album back in 2018, but seemed to give up on it. Jimmy's journey from a young, passionate guitarist to a legendary rock star has been full of huge wins and personal tough times. All through his career, not only has he inspired tons of musicians, but he also changed the whole world of rock music. He has kept reinventing himself, both in music and in his personal life. Now, at 80, he is still a loved figure, still passionate about music, and finding happiness in his personal life.